In the beginning, all creatures were a part of wilderness. They each lived out their lives within a tiny fragment of time, and generation after generation evolved in harmony with their surroundings. But one species became more numerous and more powerful, until finally, we dominated all others. Fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it. 10 million buffalo once roamed the plains of North America. By the end of the 19th century, they had been almost completely annihilated. Now, within this sanctuary, are 12,000 of their relatives. Wood Buffalo National Park in northern Alberta. Each year, in late spring, the Canadian Wildlife Service conducts a roundup and drives 3,000 to 4,000 head into the pens at Sweetgrass Station. The whole herd is touchy, near the edge of panic. The cows have young with them who are terrified of being separated from their mothers.
You didn't brand the yearling here, huh?
No, I didn't brand that yearling.
I haven't done this one because I can't reach it.
Move up there, big
my
boy.
friend.
Come on. Yeah. Come on there, big boy.
It's a difficult operation, but somehow they all get counted, medically checked, and vaccinated against anthrax and brucellosis.
All done? Cool.
Dr. Ann Currier, biologist with the Canadian Wildlife Service, a specialist in animal husbandry. This is her first summer working with bison.
Up.
Yeah, so I was trying to get father to move.
Yeah, come on. Up. Come on.
Processing 4,000 animals takes a week of hard work in sun and dust. It's only a third the total number, but it's enough to check out the general state of health and prevent an outbreak of disease which could wipe out the entire herd.
Got a horn caught or something.
No. Wait. No. Wait just a minute.
Yeah? Can you get that on the other side?
Instinctively, the bighorn sheep have spent the winter high up to avoid predators. But up there, the feeding is poor. Now they're hungry and out of condition.
Okay. So 6 annuli, an age of 6+, horn length. 34 and 3/8. Wait, did we give you total length there? We didn't.
Yeah, we get total length.
that?
Ear length next.
In the past, there's been a high death rate at this time of the year. This has become the major concern of biologist John Stelfox.
You know, it's interesting in looking at the results we're getting from the study in the parks, looking at the health of the animals, the range, the way they grow. You know, right in this park, the last big die-off was, 32 years ago from what was known as the lungworm pneumonia epidemic. There was very heavy domestic and wild ungulate competition, which undoubtedly played a very important role in causing this decline. So a great deal of work is being done to correct this competition problem and try and put priority on the range for the wild animals. $200. Now don't go like that.
Watch out, guys. Get on there, dirty bugger.
Sit on there.
Okay.
Okay. Boy, she's got ticks. Look at those ticks on there, eh? All around. He's got just a little on there, and that's all. But he hasn't got much. He's not rubbed bad, is he? But that's less than the others, Clancy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
I guess we can let him
go.
go, eh? Okay, bring it off.
Where you go? That's it for him.
He's a nice looking animal, isn't he?
He's gone, yep.
Hey, beauty.
Eddie, ready?
We can help. The film we show, World in a Marsh, is an award winner.
Most of our wildlife is really wild. Ontario is...
They can show you where to go to the washer.
You're right.
Sorry, no caged elephants
The
here.
Wye Marsh Wildlife Centre at Midland, Ontario, is the first of a series of centres planned by the Canadian Wildlife Service. They will try to invoke a sense of relationship with nature. The young are its most important visitors, the future keepers of wildlife.
Although the garter snake doesn't have a mouth large enough to swallow a bullfrog as big as this, the frogs make themselves look even larger, an impossible mouthful. But if the snake cannot eat the frog, perhaps the frog can eat the snake.
Storm 26, transect 10, and the winds are calm. Temperature is about 50 degrees. mallard, 3 drakes flocked, and a green-winged teal, lone drake. Scopater, scopalundre, a coot, scopalundre, scopaflocket.
Almost all of North America's waterfowl are born in Canada. 60% of the ducks breed in the potholes of the prairies. Each year, as part of a joint Canadian-United States program, what seems an almost impossible task is carried out. A reliable estimate of the number of breeding pairs of every species of duck over thousands of square miles of territory. One of the areas surveyed is just east of Calgary. This is unique terrain and one of the most productive breeding grounds. But it has its problems. The sloughs are shallow and sometimes dry out before nesting is over. The ducks do damage crops, and the farmer is tempted to drain and fill. The conservation program encourages him not to. East, in New Brunswick, there are duck marshes, but few potholes. At Tantramar Marsh, an attempt to simulate the habitat of the West. In a couple of years, when the craters have flooded and some vegetation has grown in, the duck population may begin to increase. Every hole may be shared by several species, but there will be only one pair of each kind in each hole.
What kind is it?
That's a milk snake.
They bite it. Do
Yeah.
they bite?
They're most vicious when they're little like this. When they get big, about 3.5 feet long, they get more docile. And they don't try to bite so hard.
Make them bite.
You can touch them now, it's all right. I'm holding them by the head. A man found these eggs here in his compost pile, and he brought them in to us. They were just hatching out at the time he brought them in. These snakes now are only about 3 days old.
3.
You can see they're quite tiny.
Well, don't touch them. They're off. Look at that. Look at his tail is twisting around my thumb. No, you compare one to the big ones. You're not supposed to do that.
Have you seen them before around the area?
Dry up. Hey, there's a trout.
A lot of the streams, especially near large cities, tend to get fished out because there's so many people using them. And so the wildlife people catch the trout and they take the eggs out of them and they raise them in fish hatcheries. And they keep the fish in a hatchery until they're about 3 years old. They're about 6 to 8 inches long, and then they release them into the streams and stock the streams again. In this way,
These fish have spent their first years under ideal conditions at a hatchery near Jasper. They will spend the rest of their lives in a natural environment where they will need to fend for themselves. But before they're released into a lake, its ability to support them must be known. Its oxygen concentration is critical, particularly for trout. So is its size, its temperature variation throughout the year, the life forms it already contains. Their diet now will be different from what they were raised on in the hatchery. Their new source of food will be minute plankton organisms, fairy shrimps, the larvae and nymph forms of insects, and the adult insects themselves. From the data that's been collected, it's been estimated that the lake will support these fish. How long they will live here depends upon the skill and the number of fishermen who come to cast their lines on these waters. In a society based upon industrial expansion and the exploitation of resources, such places are becoming increasingly rare and precious. The fisherman's values have little to do with economics. This is just a place where the fishing is good, the air is fresh, and the water clean. A new generation, an old experience. How many more generations will enjoy what has always been taken for granted?
Now, when you put poison in the food chain, you find out that you're poisoning the top of the food chain, the horned owls, too. And it might be man that you're poisoning as well as the horned owls. You see, DDT is dangerous because it doesn't pass through our bodies as other food does. It builds up in our tissues. So then, perhaps a falcon might eat the robin that had eaten the caterpillars. And after he's eaten a few robins, the amount of DDT is going right across the ceiling there, that red ribbon. Goes all across there, and that's how much he has in him.
The Badlands of southern Alberta, haunt of the prairie falcon. The peregrine falcon also once kept company here, but his kind is fast disappearing. All the aerial hunters seem doomed by DDT. The poison makes them unable to secrete calcium adequately, and now their eggshells are paper thin, too fragile to guarantee survival. Other chemicals seem to be having the same fatal effects.
Invariably, any discussions I've had with people both here and in the States, it seems you always end up talking about just how serious the situation is. How do you get across to people who use these chemicals or that are involved in the manufacture of them, where the economy is to some extent dependent on the use of these chemicals? How do you get across the seriousness of this? People won't see into the future. They think that you're that it's a storm in a teacup, that you're manufacturing things, and we're not manufacturing what happened to the peregrine. This anyone can see. It looks like the same thing is happening now in the prairies with the prairie falcon here, perhaps due to another chemical altogether.
Dick Fife has studied the falcons for 15 years.
The magazine articles most recently have been lamenting this whole global pollution problem, of which pesticides is just one. If we were to stop DDT today, we would still be suffering the effects or finding the effects of these chemicals for the next 10 to 15 years. If we were to stop today, we couldn't stop what is the chain of events that is already going on. And you can't sever one resource from another. You can't sever agriculture from the environment, from the soil, from the trees, from the grass, from everything else that's a part of it. You simply cannot do this. We're all a part of it. And it has to be maintained as a quality environment, or else it will destroy itself. There's no two ways about it.
Jutting out into Lake Erie is a small promontory that forms the southernmost tip of Canada. For many of the city dwellers of southern Ontario, Point Pelee National Park is a weekend refuge. A quiet place, very different from the surroundings of the working week. It is also a sanctuary for birds. Spring brings the birds up from the south and the people out from the cities. For above all, this is a place to see birds. "200 varieties arrive here in April and May. Tanagers, orioles, grosbeak, warblers. Their songs and colors celebrate the end of winter. They give a passing pleasure, but one that marks the seasons. Are all the birds to go the way of the passenger pigeon? The last wild one collided with a charge of shot over Wisconsin in 1909. Once they had flocked in millions, in great columns that stretched from one horizon to the other. In less than 50 years, they were shot, clubbed, and netted into extinction. The Carolina parakeet has also gone forever, and the Labrador duck. The great auk once lived in enormous flocks off the coast of Newfoundland. They were a flightless bird that had known few predators until the white man came. Standing meekly on the rocks, they were slaughtered by the thousands and taken for food by passing ships. None has been seen since 1844. All that remains are a few stuffed specimens and a box full of bones. Green Island is a remote granite crag 7 miles off the east coast of Newfoundland. It's the nesting ground of more than 100,000 seabirds. For 20 years, Dr. Leslie Tuck has been studying the birds that come here, particularly the murres, who belong to the same family as the extinct great auk. The birds arrive around the middle of June, spending the summer months raising a family and providing a chance to do some banding. Any chance to band the murres is welcomed, for only 1 or 2% of the bands are ever retrieved. While they're here, they occupy the island in a distinctive pattern. The top of the island is puffin territory. Here the slopes are gentle and grassy, and the soft soil is a mass of burrows that they've dug to shelter their eggs. On the outer edges are the murres, crowded onto every available flat spot and spending most of their time in preventing the chicks from tumbling prematurely into the sea. On the sheer walls of the gulches that split the cliff, the kittiwakes nest alone on tiny, precarious ledges. Passing ships, which once eliminated the auk, now threaten all the species.
They can often find a tremendous mortality due to our pollution. If there's a very small spot of oil on the belly, for instance, destroys the insulation of the feathers, and the vulnerable organs are exposed to the chilling of the North Atlantic, which is extremely cold. So if a bird gets into an oil slick, if it doesn't perish immediately, very likely it will perish within a matter of weeks, one way or another.
This is one of the rarest birds in the world. In 1941, there were only 14 whooping cranes left, a hair's breadth away from extinction. Efforts were started in 1945 to try to save the species. In the spring of 1970, there were 56 birds in the wild. This is their only known breeding ground, the Sass River area in Wood Buffalo Park.
The whooping crane probably never was an extremely abundant species. The birds may have existed in the thousands, but undoubtedly they never occurred in the huge flocks that we find in the sandhill cranes even today. The whooping cranes formerly nested North and South Dakotas. And it is most likely that because of man's agricultural practices and the encroachment of civilization on the nesting areas, the birds were forced out of these areas until only the extreme northern portion of the ancestral breeding range remained, where we now find the last dozen or so breeding pairs of whooping cranes.
Ernie Kite, biologist with the Canadian Wildlife Service, has been making flights out over the nesting area in order to plot the nest sites. He's managed to find a sufficient number of nesting pairs to give some idea of the present population. This past year, 1970, he found 14 pairs. This is the highest recorded number of breeding pairs of whooping cranes. Canadian and U.S. agencies have set up a system for collecting eggs from Sass River and raising the chicks in captivity. This is one of the most delicate projects the Canadian Wildlife Service has ever undertaken. It is complicated by the fact that these birds are not only rare, but are migratory, breeding in Canada, but spending the winter at Aransas in Texas.
Even though most of the whooping cranes lay 2 eggs, the arrival at Aransas of a pair of whooping cranes with twin young is an extreme rare occurrence. Something therefore happens to that second egg. And it is this egg that we are trying to save by collecting one of the two.
Throughout the night, a watch is kept on the eggs. In the morning, a jet will arrive to take them south. The first year, a commercial airline was used. But for the last 2 years, the Canadian Armed Forces have cooperated in flying the eggs direct from Fort Smith to Laurel, Maryland. Since eggs breathe, they're supplied with oxygen during the flight. It's not known whether this is really necessary, but little is left to chance. Their temperature is held at a steady 98, with insulation and hot water bottles. Andrews Air Force Base, Washington. The responsibility is handed from one nation to another. A few miles away is the Center for Endangered Species, run by the United States Department of the Interior. The transfer has been made just short of the first week in June, the usual hatching period. Within a few days, one of the eggs begins to pip, and the whooping crane population increases by 1. From the 10 eggs picked up at Sass River, 7 healthy young cranes were born. So far, 24 chicks have been hand-raised at Patuxent. The idea is to build up a captive breeding group. The young of these birds will be released to join the wild flock. Protected internationally, it may slowly grow back from the edge of extinction.
Watch him chomp your finger up.
Can he fly?
Yeah. Yeah.
How did you ever catch him?
Grabbed him.
He was probably stunned by hitting the window, and I think he'll be all right now. So you could let him go. Just hold him up.
By the way of his eyes, he doesn't
away.
look so.
There he goes.
September. The short Arctic summer has ended. The tailwind is right, and a new generation joins the long flight south. The Central Flyway over Kindersley, Saskatchewan. For 3 weeks, the great flocks come by. Snow geese, white fronts, Canadas, Rosses. $500 birds for every click. In 1917, the Migratory Bird Act laid down the basis for a continuing study. This year's count will be compared with all the previous years, and internationally, next year's bag limit will be decided. By the time they reach southern Saskatchewan, the geese have flown some 1,500 miles. They rest here for a week or so, readying themselves for the next great leg of their journey to Texas. They have fed in the early morning in the stubble of the wheat fields. Now at midday, they're loafing on the sloughs, unaware of the cannon net lying neatly folded on the shore. A lucky shot may gently capture 20 or 30 birds. In the water, a few in danger of drowning are quickly hauled ashore. This is one of the best techniques for capturing the birds alive without harming them. They'll be banded and examined and then released. They're frightened, but it's their pride that hurts most. The captures serve the many studies that are always underway. These are long-term projects. It may be 5 years before results can be recorded, and sometimes they provide more questions than answers. It's a job that's often frustrating, full of disappointments, and painfully slow. It's a job for patient men. Confused by the experience, some birds become disoriented. They're alarmed, their wings are wet, and they find they can't fly. Not long ago, their annual molt robbed them of flight for several weeks. They seem to react as if they were still in that condition. Instead of going back to the water, they head for the open fields and perhaps a waiting fox. If they can be held back for 15 minutes, their wings will dry out and they will realize that they can fly again. Until then, they have a mind of their own.
There's been a theory prevalent that polar bears of the world moved around the pole in a circumpolar manner, that they moved in this way because the pack ice moves in a clockwise manner around the pole. Well, this seemed unnatural to me. All animals that have been studied show a very strong attachment to a home area. And so far, my data at least have shown tentatively that they don't move very far. I've got recaptures on a number of bears now, and these are adult animals. And again, they've always been almost in the same area that they were originally marked in.
What does he weigh? 900, 1,100 pounds? Say 1,000. Yes, about 1,000. You have to know his weight to judge the dosage. Seven cc's in 2 or 3 shots. Too little and he'll be difficult to handle. Too much and it might kill him. April, 60 miles west of Fort George, Quebec, the center of James Bay, just about the southern limit of polar bear territory. For 5 years now, Dr. Charles Jonkel of the Canadian Wildlife Service has been studying the mobility and population dynamics of polar bears.
On a worldwide scale, perhaps the total population is going down faster than it should. Some of the Eskimo hunters, for example, felt, that something was wrong. Where they had been getting 3 or 4 or 5 bears a year with their dogs, they could suddenly go out on one trip with their skidoos and get 7 or 8 bears. We try to make the most of the situation when we do have a bear, so that they can be definitely identified anytime that they're recaptured or killed in the future. We put a tattoo inside the upper lip in case the bear were killed by an Eskimo or an Indian, or even if it was killed illegally and somehow got into the legal fur trade. We hope that the people involved in the tanning process will notify us that such and such a bear was turned in and find out where it was killed.
In 1969, about 500 bears were killed in Canada. Their pelts fetched their Eskimo hunters up to $250 apiece. As the North is developed, the competition for space between man and the polar bear is increasing. If we are to coexist with this great predator, we must learn much more about his behavior and his needs. Dr. Jonkel has marked 200 bears so far. The markings will chart the territory they move about in and may measure the years the individual can expect to live. The effects of the drug will wear off in an hour or so. It's probably not a pleasant experience for him, but the ordeal of a few may mean the difference between survival and death for the species. "2,000 miles away, a snare has been set and sprung.
Watch out! Watch out! Okay, he's cut now. He's held for a while. Harry, do you want to get those packs?
Kluane Game Sanctuary, southwest Yukon. Dr. Arthur Pearson.
Come on. Charge here. Watch out! Watch out!
Well, red-white, we call them red-white because we have a red flag of polyvinyl chloride in the left ear and a white flag in the right ear. Red-white is a bear that we first caught in 1966, and he's sort of an enigma with us. In '66, we caught him 3 times. In 1967, we caught him 4 times, but he finally became very smart about eluding our traps and used to raid our sets. 1968, he proved to be even more effective at raiding our traps, and we never did catch him. In 1969, he was exactly the same until today when he wandered into a blind snare.
The last phase of a 5-year study on the grizzly bear.
The most important thing is the study of the population dynamics, or the population ecology. How many grizzlies inhabit the area? How well can they survive? How many young do they have? What's the mortality rate? These are questions that we would like to answer. Once the bear is weighed and measured, a colored flasher or flag is put in each ear for visual identification at considerable distance. The animal is then collared or telemetered. A radio transmitter is hung around its neck. We remove a rudimentary premolar tooth to give us an accurate age of the animal. In the cementum of the teeth, you find annular rings, growth rings, much like you will find in a tree. And by sectioning and staining these and reading them under a microscope, you can get a very accurate age of the animal. Study of the blood hematology, we're studying things like the number of red blood cells, the number of white blood cells, the hemoglobin content. They're all measures that characterize the quality of the blood. Now, Red White had obviously been in a fight with another bear. These tooth punctures were badly infected. We give our bears a shot of antibiotic after we handle them, punch a hole in their ear to put a tag in, things like this. We use antibiotics to give them some protection.
Not long ago, grizzlies could be found from Mexico to Alaska. Now, the Mexican grizzly is finished. In the United States, they're becoming rare. The barren grounds of the North may be their last refuge.
I don't know where he dens up. I don't know what his range is, but after today, now that we have a radio collar on him, I think we're going to be able to just see where Mr. Red White goes and what he does for at least the following 3 months until he dens up sometime around the middle or the end of October.
It's not very nice to float along a river and be 100 miles below a city and still find detergents and suds floating throughout your river. At the same time, it's not very nice to be looking at a peregrine falcon eyrie, knowing that we're looking at birds which, in all likelihood, will not be back next year, that we're looking at birds rarer than the whooping crane and which are doomed to extinction because of the food they're eating. The only thing that can be done to save this species is we have to try and save a remnant in captivity, hopefully to re-release into the wild at some time in the future, if nothing else, or just to keep the birds alive.
Not until another creation at another time could there ever be as beautiful as this species come back again. Man's mind has given him dominion over all other creatures. Unless he decides to use his powers wisely, he may find his own years numbered on this small planet.